Sometimes it is extremely difficult to love and root for the athletes on and off of the court, field, pitch, ice, whichever one that they are taking part in, because what we've seen the trend in the last year really starting the tipping point with Ray Rice in the video with his fiance in which he horrifically knocked her out in an elevator. John Jones, cocaine addiction. I shouldn't say addiction, but cocaine issues. Jarrett Stoll, cocaine issues. Floyd Mayweather and domestic violence. I mean, the list goes on. A-Rod and steroids. And some of these are comparing apples to oranges to bananas to pears. I think I'm running out of fruits. But when you look at, as a fan of sports, it's tough to make that distinction. Where is the line drawn? So, Russ, I want to start with you. Can you root for an athlete as just an athlete and not as a person?
I think you can, especially if you're a true fan. I think that the issue is when that line, whatever that line is for each individual, is crossed. And I think certainly seeing the NFL and the NHL with Slava Voinov, domestic violence, that's not cool. No. So it's hard to root for a player who's been involved in that. But as a fan, I think it touches on our kind of native instincts that you want your team to win, and even though the person can be disreputable off the field or off the ice, you're going to root for that player to perform and help your team win. So, I think most people, myself included, you kind of have two minds.
Yeah, it's always going to be a tough distinction, especially if your team's winning. If you're losing, it's just easy to root against that person, especially if they're pulling some of the moves that we've seen Floyd or A-Rod, or again, the list, unfortunately, goes on and on and on. Vic, any thoughts, comments?
Well, I think you mentioned a distinction. I think there's also a distinction, too, between rooting for a person and respecting their skills. So even if you have a player on your team and he just may be a complete jerk, and so you respect that he may be a great player, but you're not necessarily rooting for the guy. It's kind of an interesting split, how you want to approach it. And this type of argument that was brought up, even with Woody Allen, when he got into some trouble in the early 90s accused of child molestation. It's like, where do you separate the man and the artist? So if he makes a really funny movie, should I still laugh? Even though this may be a despicable individual, it's a tough call to make. And it gets into the old argument, is the man, the artist, the same?
It's a great example to pull up, of course, using Woody Allen as that reference. It is, because it's kind of hard not to laugh at Woody Allen movies at any point. And of course, the example I always use is, and as we've been talking, at least on TYT Sports, about Mayweather versus Pacquiao, of course, the hype that was built around this fight. I love and respect Floyd Mayweather when he's in the ring. And that's where my line is drawn, because as a boxer, and just a boxer, he's one of the greatest of all time, certainly the greatest of my generation. But when he steps outside the ring, no, I absolutely would never agree with what he does and the human being that he is. But in terms of other players like Alex Rodriguez, it's got to be tough for people like Yankee fans who have booed A-Rod for years and years and years, and now he's kind of carrying that team. At least he's exceeded every expectation since he's been on the field.
Well, you should still say, as a Yankee fan, you're still looking at the money that has been paid to him over the years, and you're just saying he's just doing his job.
Right.
So you don't necessarily have to root for him to do your job. It's like, if your job is to walk a dog, should you get a round of applause because you walked the dog? Like, no, his job is to hit home runs and drive in runs.
Right.
He should not get any extra accolade for that.
No.
So if he's helping the team win, and we put aside whatever issues he has, it's, again, making that split.
There could be like a medium ground, maybe golf claps for A-Rod at the stand. So you stand, but you don't clap too loudly.
I think the other issue on this topic is that I think in the media, we've elevated sports figures to be, a leader in their particular field, and we're translating that often to off the field. And as we've seen in, say, politics, which is a whole other topic, they don't always sync up. So the fact that A-Rod's a leader on his team, or maybe even the league at this point, does not mean he also is a great human being or a leader in the world. There are some great examples of that where the persona meshes both on and off the field, like Aaron Rodgers.
Of course.
But there are also examples to the contrary.
Right, and some people don't want that spotlight. I want to use Marshawn Lynch as the example, who is a leader on the field, Super Bowl champion. But as we've seen with the media specifically, he doesn't want to answer the questions. He doesn't want any of that spotlight on him the second he leaves the field, yet we force our ways in to try to show like there's got to be a human side to Marshawn Lynch. There's got to be that fun-loving guy that we want to put on a pedestal, but some just don't want that.
Looking at somebody, what they do in terms of being a great athlete versus being a person. And just in the news now with Isaiah Thomas and
Right.
the whole flap with Madison Square Garden, they're putting him in charge of the WNBA team, which is a completely tone-deaf situation because when he was president of the Knicks, he was involved in a sexual harassment case that cost the Knicks $11 million.
How many awful Knicks references are you going to bring up in one show, Vic? It's been Reggie Miller, now Isaiah. Are you going to bring up Starberry?
Yeah, well, we can bring him too because he and Isaiah Thomas go hand in hand.
Right.
That's the debacle that keeps on giving. But the fact is, you look at him as a player with the Pistons. One of the elite players, tough player. In the finals against the Lakers, he practically, scores 25 points in one quarter on one leg. I mean, this is one of the great basketball players of all times, especially a small guy like him.
Yeah.
Back-to-back NBA championships. Outside the playing career is an entirely different story. So I think that's just another example that just in the news right now, you see another example of the player and not the player.
And I think the leagues, it's a good point because I think the leagues have historically been pretty tone deaf on those issues. I think with the Ray Rice situation, I think that they've become much more focused, particularly on domestic violence. Drugs and sort of the victimless crimes, I think they're less concerned about. But at least on the domestic violence assault piece, they seem to be taking it much more seriously than they have in the past, which I think is a good thing.
Yes, I agree 1,000%. We've seen it across, of course, the NFL as they were very quick to realize where they messed up and lost a step, and of course are trying to make that step back up. But what about when you have multiple offenders? John Jones consistently, of recent hit and run, ran away from a crime scene where he traffic accident with a pregnant lady's car, unfortunately, and before that busted for failed drug test on cocaine. In terms of if it's a one-time occurrence, is that any different from it continuously happening? I mean, we've seen Josh Hamilton constantly going back to his drug of choice, unfortunately, cocaine, and part of me wants to say that some of these guys just need help, and that's where they should be cutting the sport out of it, and whoever's backing them needs to give them that help, whether it be rehab, support, so they can get back on their feet. But of course, when it happens again and again and again, should there be a different line drawn there or higher penalties?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the issue of, you're right, that the teams and the leagues have to provide more support and realize, just like the general populace, you're going to have a certain number of people who have addiction issues and have to be dealt with. I think historically the leagues have tried to just put it under a mushroom and say it doesn't exist here. I think being more out in the open and say, look, this person does have a drug addiction, he has a problem with cocaine, with domestic violence, and give them treatment. I don't necessarily think that would prohibit them from participating, but I think it would certainly be better in the public's mind if they came out and with the dirty laundry and say, yeah, we have dirty laundry. It's not going to affect their brand. I mean, if you look at the revenues of any of the major sports, given the rise of all this, none of them have gone down. NFL's record, NBA,
the number,
Major League Baseball, even the NHL keeps going up. So I think people are still going to watch the sport. They're still going to attend. They're still going to buy their hot dogs and popcorn. And I think that's what the league has historically been concerned about, is people will stay away. Back in the, I think it was 70s or so, the NBA was viewed as too thuggish.
Yeah.
And people wouldn't take their kids. Now look at it. I think that era's over, but I think that the leagues are still living in that kind of mindset that, we don't want to talk about this.
Right, we need that spotless record so families can still feel welcome to come to games. Victor, any remaining thoughts before we wrap up here?
Well, I think the whole concept of rehab has evolved to a point now where it's no longer this taboo situation. Like Johnny Manziel's in rehab. All right, hope he does well with that. I remember, this is going back a little bit, but when Dwight Gooden went into rehab, it was a huge deal. It was a big scandal. And I remember when he was
every single newspaper magazine.
Yeah, when he was coming back after, I don't know if it was suspension, but after rehab, he was going to make his first start at Shea. And when the New York tabloids, was making a stand, they wanted people to stand up and boo to make a statement against Dwight Gooden because he had gone into rehab. Now it's not that big a deal. It's almost like par for course for some of these athletes.
Yeah,
like, all right,
unfortunately for
he had
some,
his wild
yes.
years, he had his rehab years, and these were his mature years.
Right.
So it's part of the story arc.
Right, and then we've seen the storylines going forward. Of course, there's, the players like Jameis Winston coming to the NFL draft. There's already circulating headlines of, can this guy be mature? Can this guy stay out of trouble? And that's going to be a continuing theme, especially, I always bring it back to this point with the idea of social media in play. Anything could be leaked at any single point. It's not like you have to wait till the 6 a.m. paper comes around anymore to know what happened the night before. Today's day and age, news circulates 25 hours a day.
That's a good point, which is that these are, in the main, most of them, kids. We're talking about 20, 21, 22-year-old kids. And, they're making mistakes. They're dealing with truly the big leagues. And some of them are going to get seduced.
Yeah, we live in a crazy age of tech, social media, and news. It's just how it works nowadays. But thank you for stopping by our news channel to watch The Rundown, brought to you by the Postgame and TYT Sports. You can check us out both on YouTube. Please give us a subscription and leave all your thoughts and comments on where you lie in terms of athletes on and off the field, pitch, court, ice. Am I missing any? Turf? I think that's all I got. Octagon. Ring. There's too many.
There you go.
From Victor, Russ, and Jason. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.